We're ready to go ahead and start reassembling the Bulova 11 AF movement for our Bulova President watch. The first thing we need to do is install the mainspring into the mainspring barrel and assemble the barrel. I've got a brand new mainspring for it, and this is a factory original Bulova mainspring. And Bulova had this really neat system where they packaged the mainsprings in these big plastic rings that held them. Now this is different than the real thin metal washers that most mainsprings come with. What's special about this is that notice how the hole that the mainspring is in is hexagon shaped. Bulova had a special tool that had these hexagon shaped pegs in different sizes, and they're color coded. So you choose the one that matches the color of the plastic holder for the new mainspring, and you just stick the appropriate hexagon into it and pop it right into the mainspring barrel. And it's labeled here barrel side on this side, and it's the hole in the bottom there is made so that the mainspring barrel will fit right into that hole, so it's perfectly aligned. So you just stick the barrel onto that just like that, and then flip it over. Take our special tool here, make sure you get the right color, turn it till it pops in to the corresponding shape on the plastic ring, and then you just push the mainspring directly into the barrel with it. And I'm gonna push this into the barrel, having it sitting on the table, that way I don't have it fall out of my hand in the middle of it and ruin the mainspring. Just like that, snapped right in. You heard the pop, and there it is, perfectly pushed in all the way. None of the hassles I've had trying to push these in with my fingers with the other mainsprings, where sometimes some of the coils don't push down all the way. I wish all mainsprings were packaged like this. This would be really, really nice. So the next thing we need to do now is we need to put in the barrel arbor. And we're going to use a pen vise for that purpose. And as you can see here, I've got the barrel arbor stuck into the jaws of a pen vise. The arbor has two ends. One end has a hole in it, like you can see here, and the other end does not. The end with the hole is the end you want sticking out of the pen vise. And what we're going to do is we need to insert the barrel arbor into the center of the spring, into the center coil. The center coil is just slightly smaller than the diameter of the barrel arbor. That way it'll grip the arbor. And so we have to kind of stick it in there and kind of twist it around, work its way in. Actually, that popped in a lot easier than they usually do. So you can see here how the bottom of the arbor sticks out through the bottom of the barrel. Actually, this is the top of the barrel. When we put it into the movement, this side's going to go up. The side with the barrel lid goes down in the movement. But what I want to do now is turn it to see if it catches the spring. And it is. I can feel the tension on it now. No, I think I'm turning it the wrong direction. Doesn't seem to be catching the spring. Whoa, there's the reason. The end of the mainspring broke off. Never seen that happen before. You can see it laying there inside the barrel. I'm going to pull that mainspring out and put a different one on. Fortunately, I have a spare mainspring. I bought an extra one of these, so hopefully this one will not break. I've never seen one where the end of the spring broke off like that. The end that has a hole in it snapped right off inside the mainspring barrel when I put the arbor in there. So let's go ahead and insert this one. We'll do it the same way we did the other. Put the plastic thing on top of the barrel with the barrel side indicator down. Put our little hexagon shaped tool in there. Push it down until it snaps. There we are. Now we'll try this again, and hopefully it will work this time. And it does have the barrel arbor turn direction is counterclockwise, so when I push the pen vise in here to catch the spring, I need to turn it counterclockwise to engage the hook on the barrel arbor with the mainspring. Okay, it's in. You can see it's sticking out the end there like it should. Let's turn it counterclockwise and see if it catches. Oh, that's catching. See how it's springing back when I let go? So we're good this time. So we had a bad mainspring on the first one. This one here is working. So what I'm going to do now is just loosen the pen vise so I can remove the arbor and barrel combination from it. And there we have our arbor inserted. Next thing we need to do is put the lid on. And I'm going to set it onto this tool here that has a hole in the center for the arbor to stick down into. That way when we push the lid on, we won't damage the bottom of the arbor sticking out. Now here's our lid, and the lid has two sides. One side of the lid is flat, and the other side of the lid has a little lip around the hole in the middle and a lip around the edge. The side with the lip is what goes down. So we'll just set this on top of the barrel with the arbor sticking through the hole, just like that. And then I'll just use my fingers to snap it in. This thing that it's sitting on is actually a tool that's supposed to snap it on for you. You're supposed to take the lid off this tool, set the arbor in here, and then put the lid back on and push down on it. But I've not had real good luck getting these things to work right. Yeah, let's go ahead and try it this time. I haven't done this in a long time with it. We'll see if we can make it work this time. Make sure it's centered. I'll put the lid on here. Make sure that I'm going to look at it, make sure that the arbor is sticking up through the hole in the center. It is. And then you're supposed to just push down on it until it snaps on. And I just heard it snap, so let's see if it worked. What I'm looking for here is to make sure that the lid is perfectly even all the way around, that it's not sticking up on one side or another. And it looks like it did work, so okay. That was actually a little easier than pushing it down with my fingers the way I normally do it. But I'd had trouble with some others in the past where when I used this, it didn't push down evenly and it bent the lid. So I guess I was just unlucky then. That was when I first got started doing watch repair and was a little less experienced, so maybe I just had better technique now. Now we need to get out our movement base plate and put it into a movement holder, and we can get started on installing the barrel. The barrel goes into this opening right here in the base plate, and the arbor goes through that little hole there in the center. Before I install it, I need to put a little tiny drop of oil inside that hole to lubricate the movement of the barrel. And I'm going to use the Mobius HP 1300 oil, which is the heavier oil for slow moving parts. And I'm just going to put a little tiny drop in there and rub it around the inside of this. Well, I don't want it on the outside like I'm doing here. I want it just on the inside of the hole. I'm having a little trouble looking at this through the camera to show how it's done, but I'm gonna do this looking through an eye loop when I actually put the oil on. So you don't want to get oil on the inside of this area up here. You want it just inside the hole. All right, I've got it oiled, so we can go ahead and insert the barrel. As I said before, the barrel goes in with the side of the arbor that has the hole in it. It goes up, and the lid side goes down. Just like that, it drops right in. Now the next thing we need to do is we need to put in the stem retaining screw, and it goes into a hole in the base plate right there. That hole right there is where it goes into, and it doesn't screw into that hole. It simply drops into it. The hole doesn't have screw threads in it. The threads on the screw will screw into the detent lever on the other side of the movement when we put that on, when we assemble the keyless works. There we go. That sits in just like that. Now the barrel bridge goes on next, and that'll go over the barrel and the stem retaining screw. Here's the barrel bridge, and the hole in it for the barrel arbor also needs to be lubricated just like the hole in the movement base plate was. So I'm going to put a little drop of Mobius HP 1300 inside that hole just like I did for the hole in the base plate before I install this. I've installed the barrel bridge, and as you can see, the stem retaining screw sticks up through the hole in the barrel bridge. The barrel arbor sticks up through its hole. And then there's a screw here and a screw here that hold it on. Now there's some components that go on top of the barrel bridge. The click spring, the click, the ratchet wheel, and the crown wheel. I'm not going to put those on right now because I need to put on the drivetrain wheels first. And the reason for that is that the center wheel partially overlaps the mainspring barrel, but it goes underneath the ratchet wheel. So it goes in between it goes in a little space in between the top of the barrel and the bottom of the ratchet wheel. So if I put the ratchet wheel on, I can't get the center wheel in. And I believe that the third wheel, which goes into this hole here, kind of partially goes underneath where the crown wheel is going to go as well. So I don't want to put those two components on until I get the drivetrain wheels on first, since they have to go over the drivetrain wheels. And the drivetrain wheels go in a specific order. We have the escape wheel goes here, fourth wheel here, third wheel here, and the center wheel goes through there. And they have to be put in that order: escape, fourth, third, and then center wheel. Because of the way that they kind of stack on top of each other. If you put them in the wrong order, they won't go together correctly. Before it can be placed into the movement, the escape wheel needs to be lubricated. The escape wheel is unique among all the wheels in the watch because it's the only one that you put any lubrication on the teeth of the wheel. You never put any lubrication on the teeth of any other wheel on a watch. You only put lubrication in the jewel bearings to lubricate the pivots. If you put any lubrication on the teeth of any of the other wheels, it will basically gum up the movement and destroy any of your amplitude. The escape wheel is different though. The escape wheel needs to have lubrication on the very tips of the teeth because the jewels of the pallet fork slide across those as the watch runs, and so you have to have some lubrication for that sliding action. And it's a real pain to lubricate these because you need just a teeny amount of oil on each tooth, and it's impossible to get that correct amount of oil on each tooth. So what we do is we put a little drop of oil on every fourth tooth, and then when the watch runs the pallet jewels, we'll pick up that oil and spread it evenly across the rest of the teeth, and then you'll get the correct, very thin amount of oil on each tooth. Even then, it's hard to get it on because I used to do this by holding the escape wheel on a pair of tweezers and trying to dab the oil on the teeth with an oiler, but I just couldn't hold my hand steady enough to do that. I kept getting oil on the tops and bottoms or the front or the sides of the teeth and not necessarily on the tips where it belonged. And you don't want any excess oil on the tops or bottoms or sides of the teeth because that'll add weight to the escape wheel and throw it out of balance. And so I've kind of come up with this new method I used for the last watch that I serviced, and it worked really well. I put the escape wheel on a watchmaker's anvil with the lower pivot stuck into one of the holes on the anvil, and then I take the oiler and I can just go in and touch the tip of each of the teeth that I want to lubricate, just like that, and then that guarantees I'm not getting any oil on the tops or bottom of the teeth. I'm just getting on the tips, and then I can lift it off the anvil with a pair of tweezers and put it into the movement base plate. I'm going to do the actual oiling off camera so I can look at it through an eye loop to make sure I'm getting it done correctly, but that's what I just demonstrated there is the technique that I'm using. I haven't seen anyone else do this before, but it works really well for me. In the last watch that I put together that I did like this, it ran beautifully. It worked really well. So I think this is going forward how I'm always going to lubricate my escape wheel teeth. And the lubricant we're using for this is Mobius 9415, which is a special oil just for lubricating escape wheels. I've got all the wheels installed, and you can see how they stack on top of each other in the order that I mentioned. Next thing we need to do is put on the train bridge above that, and that will hold the upper pivots for the train wheels. I have the train bridge installed. It's held on by 2 screws, one right here and one right over here. Now let's go ahead and test this and see if the drivetrain moves freely. You can see the gears fly into motion when I touch the center wheel, so everything's working good. Now I need to put on the click and the click spring, and then the ratchet wheel on top of that, and the crown wheel. The click spring is shaped like a little cane, and it goes into this little cutout here. The short end of it goes into that hole there, and then it curves around through here and back out into this area here. And that's hard to install under the camera lens because I'm going to have to put it in position and hold it down with my finger while I use a tiny screwdriver to kind of manipulate the last bit of it down into that recess because it's going to be under tension. And if I'm not careful, it can fly away and get lost. So what I'm going to do is position it like that so that it's mostly in position, and then hold onto it with my finger while I push it the rest of the way in with a little screwdriver blade. I'm going to use my smallest screwdriver for that, the little 0.6 millimeter one. Okay, you can see how the click spring went in there then, how it goes into that little recess that's machined into the top of the barrel bridge. Now we're going to put the click in next, and the click on this one's unique because it doesn't have a screw that holds it in place. It just sits down in there and is held down by the ratchet wheel on top of it. To position the click correctly, the click has a little nub on the bottom of it that goes into that little hole right there. I think I have this positioned correctly. I put the click in with the nub down in the hole, and I had to put the edge of the spring up against the back of the click right there so that when the click rotates, it'll push on the spring. So now we're going to put the ratchet wheel in next. I put the ratchet wheel in place. Note the shape of the hole in the ratchet wheel. The ratchet wheel doesn't have a round hole in it. It has a rectangular hole that has rounded ends and straight sides, and the reason for that is because it corresponds to the shape of the top of the barrel arbor, so that when you turn the ratchet wheel, when the ratchet wheel turns, the barrel arbor will turn and wind the watch. This is different than most watches. Most of them have a square hole on the ratchet wheel and a square top on the barrel arbor, but this does the same thing. It still allows the barrel arbor to be turned by the ratchet wheel. I've got the ratchet wheel installed. Now the next thing we need to put on is our crown wheel. And the crown wheel on this one is unique because the crown wheel doesn't have a single screw that holds it on, and it doesn't have a crown wheel washer like most watches do. On this one, the crown wheel sits into its position here, this little round hole, and then there's a metal plate that goes on top of it that has 2 screw holes in it, and those 2 screw holes correspond to the 2 holes you see there right here. So that plate holds the crown wheel down instead of using the single screw in the center like most of them do. And I kind of like the other system better because this has 2 very tiny, almost microscopic looking screws that are going to be a pain to get in, but that's how it's held on this one. You can see how the crown wheel sits in there then, and now we'll have to place the retaining cap on top of it. And this we'll have to, once I set it on here, I'll have to rotate a little bit to get the screw holes to line up with the holes in the top of the barrel bridge. And it looks like I've got it pretty close right now, but it's not quite perfect. I want to do a little test of the drivetrain, make sure that everything is running smoothly. What I'm going to do is I'm going to wind up the mainspring just a little bit so that it sends the gears into motion. And we want to watch the escape wheel it should, when it stops, have a slight backlash where it goes the opposite direction for just a short distance as it stops, instead of just coming to an abrupt stop. If it comes to an abrupt stop without the backlash, it means we've got problems in the drivetrain where something has too much friction. It could be a bent pivot or something else like that, or something that's dirty. And so we need to check that before we do any further, because if we don't correct a problem like that, if there is a problem, it will rob the watch of a lot of amplitude. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to wind up the watch using a screwdriver in the ratchet wheel screw, since I don't have the keyless works installed, so I can't wind it using the stem. The wheel normally turns clockwise, and we're seeing it backlash to counterclockwise at the very end. So yeah, everything's working good. I need to lubricate the jewels now. The center wheel jewel and the third wheel jewel will each get a little tiny drop of HP 1300 oil. The fourth wheel and escape wheel jewels will get a tiny drop of Mobius 9010, which is our lighter oil for fast moving parts. And I will put the same oil on the corresponding jewels on the bottom of the movement too for those same wheels, because there's a jewel for the center wheel, the third wheel, the fourth wheel, and escape wheel on the bottom of the movement base plate, and they'll receive the same oil that I put on the train bridge jewels. The next thing I want to install is the cannon pinion, and the cannon pinion slips over the center wheel post there. Before I put the cannon pinion on, I put on a little tiny drop of Mobius HP 1300 oil on the center wheel post, which will give a little bit of lubrication for the cannon pinion when it turns, when we're doing time setting, because the cannon pinion has to rotate on that post when you set the time on the watch. But you don't want it to be so loose that the cannon pinion doesn't stay in its position on the center wheel post when the watch is running. So let's go ahead and get the cannon pinion out. Here's the cannon pinion. It's got a gear at the bottom and a post that sticks out of the top of the gear, and this slips over the top of the center wheel post. Just like that. Now it's held on, it snaps into place. It's held on by friction, but you have to snap it down into place. So just setting it on there isn't enough. We have to push it down. And I'm going to use my tweezers for that. And what I do is I put the tweezers around the post, down against the gear at the bottom of the cannon pinion. Just like that. And then I want to push down gently and slowly. You don't want to force it down or snap it down fast. You can damage the center wheel post. So slowly, gently push it down until it snaps into place, and you'll hear it click. There, just like that, we heard the click. So the cannon pinion is installed now. The next thing we're going to do is install the keyless works and the motion works. The first thing we want to do with the keyless works is put in the clutch and the winding pinion. The winding pinion turns the crown wheel. When you turn the stem on the watch, it turns the winding pinion, and that turns the crown wheel, which then turns the ratchet wheel to wind the mainspring. If we look at the winding pinion, one side of it has this little pattern of little triangular shaped wedges cut into it, and the other side is flat. The side with the wedges cut into it goes in so that it's facing toward the center of the movement. And we're going to put it into this slot right here. You can see where I've inserted it right there. It kind of slipped off the camera's viewing area as I was inserting it. Now, the next thing we're going to put in is the clutch. And the clutch has two sides too. One side of the clutch has gear teeth cut into it, and the other side of the clutch has the same kind of pattern cut into it that the winding pinion has. This is called the clutch face, and this has to face toward the winding pinion when we put the clutch in. The side with the gear teeth faces toward the center of the movement, and the gear teeth will catch the intermediate wheel when you have it in time setting mode to turn the hands on the watch. And we're going to drop it in here just like this. I've got the clutch in correctly now. The next thing we need to do is insert the winding stem, and it needs to go through the clutch and the winding pinion both. And the clutch has the middle of the clutch that this goes through is square, and you'll see that there's a square section to the stem, and that has to go through that. So you may have to rotate this to get it to catch. There we go. So it'll go in properly. Now the next thing that we're going to put on is the detent lever, and the detent lever will hold the stem in place. The detent lever sits on top of the stem retaining screw, and what we're going to have to do is lift this up, and I'm going to have to hold the detent lever in place on the end of the screw with my fingers while I tighten the screw using a screwdriver on the other side of the movement where the screwdriver slot for the screw is at. And we have to have this positioned so that the detent lever interacts with the winding stem. The winding stem has a groove cut into it, and there's a pin on the bottom of the detent lever that goes into that groove. I've got the detent lever tightened down. I've got the stem retaining screw tightened down, and you can see here how when you pull the stem in and out, because that knob on the bottom of the detent lever goes into that groove on the stem, it makes the detent lever move when you pull the stem in and out. This is part of the system that switches from winding mode to time setting mode. And once we get the yoke and the yoke spring in and the set bridge on, you'll see how this all functions together to make that actual change where it switches back and forth between time setting and winding the mainspring. The next thing we're going to put in is the yoke, and it goes in on this pin right here and stretches across where the tip of it goes into the slot on the side of the clutch. The yoke is in place, and you can see how one end of it goes over that pin and the other end of it goes into that slot on the side of the clutch, and the tip of it goes up against the detent lever. When we pull the stem out, the detent lever will rotate, which will push against that and make it push the clutch toward the center of the movement, where it will contact the intermediate wheel, which we haven't installed yet, for time setting mode. And when the stem is pushed in, the yoke will push the clutch back toward the winding pinion so that we can wind the watch. And there's a spring that has to go in there by the yoke that gives the spring tension to make it go back and forth, and that's called the yoke spring. We're going to put it in next. The yoke spring goes along the back of the yoke, around this pin here, and then back down here along this groove that's cut into the base plate. And it's kind of hard to install. I'm going to have to hold it in place with my finger and use a tiny screwdriver to manipulate the two ends of it into place so that they both snap down into the areas they're supposed to go without it flying out and flying across the room. Here's the yoke spring, and you can see one side of it is straight and the other side is shorter and has a bit of a kink to it. The shorter kink side is what goes toward the yoke. Now I'm going to have to use a screwdriver to manipulate this long piece here and tighten it up so that it goes behind the yoke without it flying off. And that's kind of a hard thing to do on camera here without losing it. So I'm going to do that off camera and show you what the results look like in the end, how it finally fits in there. Okay, now you can see how it goes in. It's in the proper place now. The next thing we need to do is put in the minute wheel and the intermediate wheel. And the minute wheel goes onto this post right here, and then the intermediate wheel goes onto this post. You need to make sure its teeth mesh with the can and pinion. There we go. Now we can put the intermediate wheel in. Okay, I just got to get it pushed down so that the teeth mesh with the minute wheel. There we go. Okay, now the next thing we need to do is put on the set bridge. And the set bridge is basically a metal plate that covers all this stuff and keeps it from coming out. It also has a long spring coming out from it. And you can see the spring there, how it comes out from the set bridge. That's the detent spring. That's what gives you when you pull the stem out, it snaps into place. When you push it in, it snaps back into place. That detent spring on the set bridge is what gives you that. I have the set bridge partially installed. It has 3 holes in it. One hole goes over the post for the intermediate wheel. One hole goes over the post for the yoke. And then the other one is a screw hole. Now the detent spring, you can see it's kind of pushed upward here. And the reason is there's a pin underneath it that's on the detent lever, and we need to push this back so that it engages the pin in these little cutouts here. And I'll use a screwdriver for that purpose. Let's see if I can do this on camera. I've got the set bridge installed, and I can show you how this works now. Right now the stem is pushed into winding mode, and you can see the clutch is pushed up against the winding pinion. When I pull the stem out, the clutch moves toward the center of the movement and engages with the intermediate wheel. So when I turn the stem, then it would turn the wheels that are attached to the hands for time setting mode. And the reason you see the mainspring barrel turning now is because I don't have the pallet fork in on the other side to restrain the drivetrain gears from being turned. Because normally this should only turn the hands, it shouldn't turn the drivetrain gears, but that's because the pallet fork's not in there. So we need to install it next. So we'll go ahead and turn the movement over and install the pallet fork and pallet bridge now. The pallet fork is going to go into that jewel right there. Let's go ahead and install that first, and we'll put the pallet bridge on top of it. And the pallet bridge holds the upper holds the upper pivot for the pallet, and the lower pivot for the pallet goes into that jewel on the base plate that I just pointed out. I was about to put the pallet fork in, and I just realized, because I hadn't really looked at that part of the movement through a magnifier, and it wasn't that obvious looking at the little screen of my camera, the banking pins are missing. This base plate does not have any banking pins. There's holes for them where they should go, but they're not there. I went back just a second ago and looked at my disassembly video to see if the banking pins had been there when I was taking it apart, to see if maybe they got lost during the cleaning process or something. No, they were missing from the beginning. There were no banking pins visible when I took the pallet fork off. Those holes were there where the banking pins are supposed to go. So I can't use this base plate because it doesn't have banking pins. So what I'm going to do, I have some parts for this movement, and I do have another base plate. So what I'm going to have to do is take everything off this one and put it onto the other base plate and go from there. So I'm going to go ahead and disassemble it now and put it on the other base plate. Thankfully, I do have another one. I had picked up a parts movement that I found inexpensively before I started working on this, just in case I needed any parts, and I'm glad I did so. Okay, this is really interesting. I went and got my other base plate that I had for this exact same movement, and I pulled it out of the packaging that I had and looked at it, and it has no banking pins too. It's got the same 2 holes this one's got. And so I started thinking, what the heck, they couldn't possibly both be missing their banking pins. I wonder if this is a different sort of design. So I grabbed the pallet bridge and looked at it, and if we look at the pallet bridge, you can see how it's got the way it's shaped. I think the pallet bridge itself serves as the banking pins. And I think those holes in the movement base plate are just there to serve as guides to tell you where to position the pallet fork before you put the bridge on. So I think we're going to be good with this. Because come to think of it, the watch was running erratically before, but it wasn't running nearly so bad as it would be if it didn't have any banking pins. It would be really way off, way more erratic than what we had here, and would have a really snowy looking Timegrapher trace. So something was restraining the pallet fork from going too far, and it has to be this pallet bridge. So I think that's our problem, or that's our answer to this problem. As you can see here, I've got the pallet fork installed, and I've got it positioned between the 2 holes there. I'm going to go ahead and put the pallet bridge over it and see how it works. I got the pallet bridge in place. I need to put the 2 screws in to hold it down. The screws are unusual for this because one of them goes directly through the pallet bridge, the one that's on this side. But the one that's back here just kind of overlaps a thinner tip on the pallet bridge without going through it. That's kind of an unusual design. So I'll go ahead and put those in next. I've got the screws installed. The next thing we need to do is flip the base plate over and install the lower balance jewels. And we need to lubricate those 2 when we install them, so I'll show how that's done next. This is the jewel setting for the lower balance jewel, and we need to open the KIF spring, the KIF spring, and we have to do that by rotating the spring counterclockwise. So I'm just going to push on these little tines here to rotate it counterclockwise until it's aligned with the opening where I can hinge it upward. There it goes, now it's moving. I had to look at it off camera through my magnifier, and I could see it wasn't rotated quite enough to open. I gave it just a teeny bit more rotation than it hinged open. So now we can put the jewels in. This is a 2-part jewel, and the bottom part goes in first. And when the balance wheel is installed, the balance wheel's lower pivot will go through that jewel all the way through and stick out through the bottom of it, and then it'll go up against the cap jewel that goes on top of the lower jewel. So the first thing we need to do is we need to lubricate the cap jewel, and to do that we're going to put a little tiny drop of Mobius 9010 oil, our light oil for fast moving parts. We're going to put a little drop on, just big enough to cover about 50% of the surface of the jewel, and the jewel is flat on one side and domed or curved on the other. The flat side is the side we're going to put the oil on, and that's the side that goes down into the movement. And to do that I'm going to use a jewel picker, which is a tool that's designed for picking up little jewels. Here's the tip of the jewel picker. I'm going to touch the back of the cap jewel, the rounded side, and pick it up so that I can put the oil on the flat side. Alright, here's the jewel set into the setting on the base plate, and what I did was I put the drop of oil on the flat side of the cap jewel, and then I touched the flat side of the cap jewel to the top of the lower jewel, and the oil made the 2 jewels stick together. And then I was able to pick them up and just drop them in using the jewel picker just like that. So we're ready to close the spring. We need to hinge it closed, and then I need to hold the tip that goes into the opening in the lip around the setting. I need to hold it down with something like a piece of pegwood while I rotate the spring with a pair of tweezers to make it stick down. And I'm not sure how well I can show that on camera, but I'm going to try. So first I'm going to go ahead and close the hinge. And I'm going to try to hold down part of it with this piece of pegwood here while we rotate the spring clockwise to relatch it. It is rotating. So it looks like I got it started. Let's see if we can rotate the rest of the way. Yeah, there we go. That went in a lot easier than I thought it was going to. Perfect. I thought that was going to be much harder to do. Now I need to repeat this process with the jewel that's on the balance cock because it has an identical system, and then we'll be ready to put the balance wheel in. I put the balance on a balance tack, and then I lubricated the jewels and put them in and closed the kiff spring on this one just like I did on the lower balance jewels. So now we're ready to install this onto the base plate. I've wound up the watch all the way so that when I put the balance wheel on, it should come to life if everything is set up correctly. So we'll see what we get here. There it is. It came right to life. Everything's working. Looks like it's got pretty good amplitude. It's swinging real far. I need to put the balance cock screw in so that the balance cock won't fall off, and then with that we're done assembling the movement. I'm going to go ahead and stick it on the Timegrapher just to do a preliminary check and see if we've improved the amplitude and such. I'm not going to do the final regulation now. You need to wait. The rule of thumb is you should wait 24 hours before you do the final regulation because it takes some time for the lubricants to work themselves in and everything. I'm actually going to wait probably closer to a week because I found that after a week or so things tend to drift and then settle into where they're going to be, and so it's better to do the final regulation after waiting several days instead of just 24 hours. So what I'm going to do with this is after I do the initial Timegrapher readings without doing any regulation, then I probably won't do anything else with this video. We'll end the video, and then that way you can see the assembly process now, and in a week or so when I do the final regulation, I'll make a new video showing the final regulation, installing the dial and setting the hands. Look at these incredible readings. Plus 6 seconds per day, 303 degrees of amplitude, 0.4 milliseconds of beat error. This is with no regulation or anything. This is just after I assembled the watch and relubricated it, and we got readings that are actually pretty close to perfect. It's not going to take much final regulation on this, but I'm going to let this sit for several days and see how it works out, see where it finally settles in, and then adjust it if needed. But this is an incredible result. I'm really happy with this one, how it's worked out. I'm seeing a little bit of fluctuations up and down, but I think that's probably because the lubricants need to finish working in, especially the lubricants on the escape wheel and pallet fork. So once we let this set for several days, it should settle in hopefully and stay more consistent, and we'll have a really good watch, I think. And like I said, I'm going to end the video here and then do the final regulation and the assembly of the dial and hands and casing the movement in a separate video that I'll make after I've let it set for several days and I'm ready to do that stuff. So for right now, I think this has come out really nice. I think I'm happy with it. Stay tuned. In probably a week or so, I'll have another video up showing the final work on it.